authors, welcome to Author Nation. I am Melody Ann, your host. And if you have not subscribed to the Author Nation YouTube channel, go do it now. We do live interviews every Thursday full of meaty information that authors need to know. And this week we are going to be talking about sending signals. This is powerful information if you are writing a book that you want to, put out into the world and, change your readers. My guest, Anaik Alcasas, is a book editor by day and an illustrator by night. A lifelong traveler based in Sydney, Australia, over the past decade, she has edited more than 25 nonfiction books, as well as countless digital assets for entrepreneurs and innovators worldwide. Her new book, Sending Signals, Amplify and Reach Resonance and Results in Your Ideas, is designed for leaders who are working at the edges of the possible. 7 years in the making, and we're going to talk about this. This visually rich book distills some of the best research on communication best practices, with over 200 footnotes and references and 70 plus diagrams in the book. Besides writing, editing, and illustrating, you can find Anaik collaborating in online working spaces where I met her, facilitating writing sprints across time zones and sketching live events or working on her next book. Let's welcome Anaik. Hello.
Hi, Melody. So good to see you.
Yeah, lovely to see you. And this is actually the first time we've ever met in person, even though we met way back in 2017.
Yes.
Yeah, in the marketing seminar. But this is the brilliance of good technology, right? Having, being able to meet people. So tell me a little bit about your work kind of before the book. Just give us a quick sense of who you are before the book came into being.
Absolutely. So I sort of fell into publishing in my early 20s, and don't worry, I'm not going to go back that far, but I fell into a editing and internship role. Fast forward about 15 years later, I've got 2 young children. I'm freelancing. I begin to, I pick up a lot more extended study to kind of firm up my skills. Mm-hmm. And I begin editing books, but I discover very quickly that when someone needs a nonfiction book edited, they often need a little bit of help developing the content. Whether it's just the introduction and the conclusion to tie it all together, whether it's those transitions between their ideas. And so I started getting more and more requests to actually do a little bit of light ghostwriting, help people pull their books together. And as the requests piled up, like I successfully did it a few times, I had people going, "Oh my God, you're the best writer I found on this one freelance platform where I found you," or, "Oh my God, together we can rule the world." Because I definitely brought a bit of a selling component. You're selling your ideas. You're selling what you have to share. And I was doing copywriting on the side as well, because I found out copywriting is in much higher demand than editing. Everybody thinks they can edit their book, but not everyone can produce copy that actually moves sales along. So I kind of, at the intersection of copywriting and editing and ghostwriting, I began to get more and more requests, and I was like, whoa, hold up here. I'm kind of been doing this by the seat of my pants. I've kind of been doing this intuitively, and I don't really want to do it intuitively because it is that leap every single time. So I'd like to get a little bit more methodical about it. I'd like to know that I'm hitting, just as an editor follows, that checklist. Yep, you're doing every single, you're chunking your tasks, depending on what kind of editing you're doing. By the way, that was an amazing video you made about the 4 major kinds of editing, and I love that. Everybody, please go and see Melody's video about that, because a lot of people are really fuzzy about, what kind of editing does my book need? Yeah. So chunking those tasks, and I was like, let's take that really methodical way that editors go and work through a book to make it, as excellent as possible. And let's rewind and go, can we do that methodical checklist when it comes to actually planning the book and actually creating the book? I've heard some amazing influencers say, look, you need to bake marketing into your book from the very beginning, where, you have a wonderful idea. And I think what happens is we get so sold on our own idea, we've already overcome our own skepticism and our own doubts about it. And we've sort of tested the idea. So when we come to present it, we think, oh, it's obvious. This is an obvious solution, right? And the checklist is just a kind of way to cue you and go, okay, it's obvious to you, but did you tell the reader this? Did you tell the reader this? And so that I think I've seen lots of communication books, and I know it's a saturated space. And I was like, oh, do I really want to add to the noise in the communication, how to write a book space? And the one gap I saw was bringing that sort of methodical checklist component. And so that's where the editor brain kind of is bringing something to the table that perhaps other communication books didn't bring. And, as we'll see as we explore it, it wasn't just a checklist. It was also something that was going to be very visual. As I was researching, I said, well, let's color code this. Let's not just have a checklist, which is very cut and very dry, and most people don't want to think like an editor because it's incredibly tedious. So how do we spice that up and make it so that it's color coded, so that when we're in the middle of writing that work and we're thinking about that target audience and we're going, oh, what else? I have writer's block. What else can I tell them that would really serve them? And the framework that I came up with, being color coded, is a way to kind of go, oh, did you think of this? You've got your amazing data. Did you think of adding story? Or you've got amazing stories. Did you think of adding a little bit of data to really support that? That's the sort of the big picture, bird's eye view.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So when we met back in 2017, what's that, 5 years or so, 4 years, almost 5, you were working on the book then. And I remember you, like the color coding and the research, and I remember back then, I'm like, I love this idea. This is just amazing. But you did, 7 years in the making. And I know a lot of authors like, oh, I've been doing this for 4 years, and there must be something wrong with me, or this book will never come to fruition, or whatever. But you actually did a lot of research. And I think research means things need to roll around in your brain too before you actually produce, right? So can you tell us a little bit about the color coding and the research and the 7 years?
Absolutely. So like I said, I was getting more and more requests to do books. I was like, whoa, hold up. And I am myself an avid reader of nonfiction. I admire that people are showing up in the world in that way. I admire the amount of work that takes to show up in that way. And the life-changing ability that, you may never have access to these amazing, generous, wise people, but through their books, they become your virtual mentors. Or I've heard someone express it as your mentors from afar.
Yeah.
So already a huge consumer of nonfiction books, I was reading through, with this question in the back of my mind, how can I get a bit more methodical, a little bit more intentional about, helping my clients to put out a really engaging book. And because I'm quite a visual person myself, I literally began to carry highlighters and colors, and some of the sort of masterworks that I was reading that seemed really generous and engaging. They weren't necessarily, I wasn't going for the Pulitzer Prize winners. I wasn't going for the Booker Prize. I was going for the ones that resonated with me and made me feel like I was an equal. They made me feel seen. They made me feel like, that we all have that critical voice inside our heads, but these voices were the reaffirming the best parts of myself.
Yeah. So
I took them as my models, and as I began highlighting and color coding, I was like, oh, let's test this. I was very much in, let's just experiment with this mode, because I wasn't under pressure to ship it anywhere. It was really just, I was my own first student. Like the way you learn, and then it shifted, because it's like the way you really learn something is you try to tell it to somebody else as you as you experienced in 2017 when we met on that platform, and you actually gave me some beautiful feedback on the kind of audience I was trying to serve. And I was telling you, you popped up in my emails from 2017, some of the feedback you get, like, there she is. Oh my God, we go way back. It's so fun.
Yes.
So color coding, this was in my free time. I was already a big reader of books. I read at least 100 books a year, mostly nonfiction, right? I say in the book, this is a result of analyzing 200 books. Actually, over the last several years, it's closer to 400 books, but I was being really conservative because I'm allowing for the fact that I didn't finish every book. Some of it, once in a while for a vacation, I'll sink into an amazing fiction trilogy, and that's a really great brain break for me because I live in nonfiction, right? So, yeah, I did get stuck. I mean, I know you saw that in 2017. I was struggling with how to share this with people, and it's in a way, the whole thesis or the hypothesis of my book is, if we send out signals into the void, how do we know if they're resonating with other people, if other people are really picking up the signal we intended to send? And I was my own first case study, because I would explain to people about this new framework that I was testing and experimenting with, and people would say, this is literally what people would say. They would say, this sounds so amazing, but I don't know exactly what you're talking about. And this was amazing feedback for me. I mean, it's such a gift when people can give you feedback that says, you're nearly there, but I don't quite get it. Yeah. So I sort of had to keep refining. I had to keep testing in several kinds of nonfiction books, because you've got your more sort of dreamy, the universe is with you, law of attraction books that are, let's face it, very emotional. And I was like, well, that's, they have sold hugely. So they're an interesting case study for sure. And then you have your, way over to the other side of the spectrum, you've got your business books that are telling you, business model generation or a beautiful constraint. And it's like, okay, let's see what they both did, what they both did or what they didn't do, what signals they did send and what signals they intentionally didn't send, because of the kind of audience the book was tailored for. So it wasn't a kind of, and I was very intentional about this. I never picked up a book with okay, how are they doing, how are they not doing this right? Because I think every single book is going to be tailored to that audience. And so it's not necessarily going to have every kind of signal. It's not necessarily going to be very emotional if it's not for that kind of audience. Or for the other kind of audience, it's not necessarily going to be packed with data and statistics and all those credible proofs. So, yeah, definitely was doing this in my spare time. It really helped that I took this on as a professional development project. I knew it was going to increase the excellence of my work. And so that's what kept me going. If I thought all along, we better make sure this is only good for the end result, the end possible audience, I probably would have flaked out many times. But I knew that I was not only testing it on my own work as I continued to edit books or even a little bit of ghostwriting. I was testing it, and I was also testing it in my marketing projects. Okay, I've got to go and update. I didn't do this very much in my big copywriting days, but I had to update, 200 Amazon descriptions because they weren't detailed enough. And I was like, okay, did they say, why this, why now, who's it for? Did they say, the credible, like this has been tested? And so I literally color coded them and went, okay, that's what's missing. Some of them are missing this. Some of them are saying, yep. So another thing, that's another factor of my framework, in that even though I tested it on books and I literally color coded, I have dozens of books on my shelf that have now color coding throughout them. I always had, because of the copywriting hat that I wear, I always had it in my mind that this framework would be able to be applied no matter what your content. that we're never going to think if someone has a book in them, we don't assume that they only have a book in them. That because of the nature of technology now, we are a multi-platform society, and they might have something audio like podcasts, like yourself. They might have video channel. They might have a blog. They might have a newsletter, and let's not forget the complementary content that comes with books. Often the people that I work with, they have something really practical to teach to their audience, and you can't just end with the book because the audience is going to want more. So how about the workbook? How about the online course? So I definitely kept sort of stress testing this framework and this color coding to go, okay, it seems like there's 9 top level signals, but you want to know a little bit how I got stuck, don't you? Yeah. So the getting stuck thing, oh my gosh, you've probably talked about this before. It takes so much internal growth and internal work as well to, because I'm such a fan of nonfiction and people who've paid the price really to step up and share generously their ideas, often involving vulnerability, a little bit about their failings, which is a definite signal that comes up in my framework. It's kind of like, because I admire these works so much and the generosity of them, I kind of wanted to reciprocate. And I say it very clearly in my acknowledgements that this book is my best thank you to the 100 or so books, authors that I directly cite, and the plethora of books beyond that have influenced my thinking. Yeah. So getting stuck and having to do that inner work, I had to do a lot of deep inner work. I don't know. Yeah. A lot of conversations with my partner, close mentors and friends, a lot of conversations about this idea, sort of rolling it off my tongue and seeing if it would light up somebody else's eyes, or if they would have a glazed stare, like I have no idea what you're talking about. The discipline of writing, I found out that if I was working for others, I could remove my ego from the situation and just serve my client. I could see all the beauty in their ideas, and I could see, okay, I see what you're trying to say, and the reader just wants to know a little bit more about your credibility. So let's emphasize that signal. Or I see what you're doing here, and it's just a bit of a clunky transition, so let's make it more smooth as we move to the next chapter. No problem working in service of others and amplifying their ideas. And so I had to get over that, it's possibly a woman thing, and it's possibly a editor thing. It's probably, there's factors everywhere where you're used to working behind the scenes and you don't necessarily want the spotlight. And then you go, okay, I kind of reframed it as, well, this is not the spotlight on me. This is the spotlight on something that's really generous that actually will help to really amplify out the signals that people are trying to send. And this got me over myself. This is actually not about me. And this is about, it opens the door to me being able to talk about ideas. And the way that transformative ideas that are really motivated by generosity, that are going to help people, that are going to help the planet in some way, which, let's face it, we need leaders to step up. And, they might not be obvious leaders. They might not be obviously always in the spotlight, and yet they have wisdom to share with us about how to avert a climate crisis, about how to live more sustainably, and about how to see and recognize and acknowledge some of our less acknowledged voices. So the inner work, the getting stuck was a big piece. Another big piece I found was that I'm highly independent. I've worked from home for years. I love working from home. As you know, because we met online, the way that I've built up that sort of water cooler slash colleague circles where I could riff off ideas and hear others' ideas and give feedback, has been these really generous online workshop spaces, which testing those ideas and reiterating on those ideas have I know the people piece, the collaboration piece was missing for me, and I've slowly grown and I've slowly learned. Another thing I did was I got an accountability partner. Oh. I kind of got a little bit sick of I'd come up to a new workshop and I'd be workshopping. I had other little projects as well that I would workshop, but this was the big one. This is the one I've been obsessed with, and that has taken up so much of the bandwidth in my brain. And I got a little bit sick of telling the beginning stages of the framework. And I was like, I've got to push it over the hump. People are going, people were saying, Anaik, you had better ship this. So I finally, last year, I'm lucky that I have so many amazing, smart people that I've encountered in the last several years. And one of them, I'll give a shout out to her, Songy Knox, who has a business. She's actually got an amazing business based around empowering small business owners and really helping them to show up online. And the title of her book and her framework is How Do You Want to Be Seen? And she's really speaking to people who they're the kind of genius that they manifest is not a spotlight seeking genius. And yet in our highly visible society, you need to be able to show up in a new way and show up consistently and frequently. Yeah. So she became my accountability partner for the first draft, where I was, I attempted the first draft a couple times, and woefully just like ran out of words, which was hilarious because I don't run out of words at all when I'm just talking to people. Like the famous saying goes, you don't get talker's block. So writer's block is actually a little bit of a myth. Mm-hmm. So I was sending her a word count every single day. It was very invigorating for me, that slight adrenaline and pressure of like, okay, I've told her I need to be accountable. And she kind of, she has some good tough love methods. And she says, well, I'm happy to be involved in, helping support this book. But if you stop sending me daily word counts, we won't be working together. So I was like, okay, thank you. A little bit of an ultimatum is exactly what I needed. And so I got up to a 20,000 word draft. And the problem with being an editor and writing is that all the time I had to kind of shut off my editor brain. Yes. And I had to just kind of stream of consciousness a little bit. And even though I'm telling myself, well, sending signals is about sending multiple different signals. And yet the ironic thing is when I wrote my first draft, it was very much just that I was just making statements and laying out my hypothesis. I wasn't adding in the proofs, even though I knew they were there. I wasn't adding in all the amazing, juicy stories, even though I knew they were there. Yeah. And I had to kind of shut down and go, okay, well, this is interesting. This is interesting to note that this framework really might help someone plan their book. It definitely helped me plan my book. But when I had to write that first draft, I almost had to kind of put it to the side. So this is a hot tip that this book is not for someone who's just starting their first draft. Maybe to help them outline, but then they need to put it to the side and just share because, you're sort of turning off that small ego brain and you're letting the wisdom sort of emerge from within you, because so much of it is hard to place words around. And I know you're nodding and I know you know this. Yeah. You have to let it emerge. What wants to emerge? There's a little bit, and it sounds a little bit woo-woo, but there's the case of, you know what? If you let your analytical brain write that first draft, I think that the temptation is that it will just sound safe and it will just sound like what everybody else is saying. Yep. Whereas you need to manifest, and of course I'm speaking to all the ones who are writing their first or second book, you need to manifest that unique wisdom that, it's not going to contradict other wisdom, but it's not going to sound exactly like everybody else either. Yeah. So I think that was a bit of an aha moment for me, that the editor brain had to go and have a holiday. Yeah, and even the framework, had to be put to the side. So after the 20,000 words, I was like, well, this is promising. It's not a whole book yet. I know it's missing a lot of pieces. And then I jumped on another accountability group, which was fellow writers, and again, posting daily. So I found a rhythm that worked for me. I wasn't posting on the weekends at all, but 4 to 5 days a week I was, and I actually put a pause on my client work for about 7 months. Wow. Because I already had a regular client commitment, and I didn't pause that. It was worth about 20 hours a week, but I needed that mental focus, because it's not exactly the client work you're doing and the time you're taking. It's the way that you end up thinking about it all the time, as you go to bed, as you wake up in the morning. And I'm really all in when I work for people and collaborate with people. I do dream about it sometimes. So yeah, no, I had to put a pause on it, which it was definitely a commitment. Like, it costs, and it cost me in the resource I could have been earning, and it cost me obviously in the emotional labor of really digging deep and going, okay, what do I have to share? What's the most generous way I can share this? But that accountability group for the second draft was really helpful, where I went back over my first draft and I went, okay, now I'm going to be my own first guinea pig. I'm going to go, okay, you made a statement that the audience needs to be finely tuned. You can't just be sending your signals into the void, hoping everybody will resonate with words. And I was like, well, I better darn well practice what I'm proposing, what I've sort of found in all these amazing nonfiction books, and that is that they always answer 5 questions in the beginning of the book. They always answer 5 questions. It's why you the author, why me the audience, like, are you really talking to me or just everybody? Yep. Why this topic and nothing else? Of all the things you're probably interested in, why'd you pick this one? Why now? Why is the timing important now? Yep. And I can expound on that a little bit later. And the final one, which actually encapsulates the entire meaning of the framework, is why bother? Why should I bother to devote the 3 to 5 to 6 hours it's going to take me to read your book? Do I, that's an investment of time that I can never get back. Are you going to tell me right up front why my investment's going to be really worth my while? And that why bother, that's where I put my marketing hat on. The why bother is you're selling people on your idea. You're selling them on, you're going to come away from this book more informed, more knowledgeable, more empowered. Depending on what the theme of this book is, more organized. You're going to come away feeling like the best parts of yourself have been re-energized to go and, do what you are supposed to do. Yeah. So, yeah, the writing community. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's so excellent. I'm so excited. I want to jump into the book, though. I'm like, let's talk about
it. I love it.
And so if you're looking for it, you can find it on Amazon. In the description, we will have the links for you there. So you can just pop in the description and find your right Amazon link and go grab it. And Anaik, I have to say, one of the things I love about your work are the visuals. I love the visuals, and I want to get into a visual. I have a visual here that I want to throw up on the screen to chat about. But just before that, really quick, one of my favorite questions, and really it's one of the questions that one of the 5 is, what promise are you making the reader? So really, if you want to just let us know in your, give your 30-second pitch, right? What promise are you making the reader?
Absolutely. I have this fun acronym in the beginning of my book, and of that, why you, why me, why this, why now, why bother. The why this is a fun acronym to remember, and it's POP, P-O-P. Have you made an audacious proposition that you're interrupting some status quo? Have you mentioned the oppositional forces that are, we all face? If you haven't acknowledged them, then you're living in fairyland, and maybe we think it's not really grounded in reality. And finally, the promised transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And the promised transformation, definitely, I think there can be several levels of promise throughout each book in the way you leave the reader feeling about their own possibilities, and the sort of the practical things they're going to come away with. So as far as the promise of my book is that you're going to come away feeling empowered to share your ideas, that you don't need permission from anybody. If you have an idea, you don't need permission. And, you don't need to send every single signal to get started. Like, you don't need permission, because if you are really driven by an idea that's going to help people, it's going to help the planet in some way. It's someone said to me, you use the word generous a lot. What does generous mean to you? And I was like, well, thank you for asking. It means someone who's interested in people, profits, and planet. So the profit thing is really important. Don't just give away your stuff for free, but also let's keep it sustainable. Let's keep it holistic. So the promise of the book of the feeling is that you are going to feel seen, and you're going to feel like, yep, I can share my ideas, because I really had in mind the reader who's going to fill a gap in a market that hasn't been filled by mainstream voices, your stereotypical, yep, they're an obvious leader, they belong to a majority, population. Those people go, well, I look like the right kind of person. I definitely should be writing a book. And I want to hear it, and that's wonderful. And a lot of those people have shown up with great generosity and sacrificed a great deal. But I'm especially talking to the people who are showing up to fill in the gaps left by the inequities that focus on the majority has left. Because I think we always have time for those signals and those voices, and they're going to speak and resonate in a way that mainstream voices won't resonate. So they're going to feel a lot of love in my book. And the other promise of the book is that, you're going to come away with a very practical, color-coded framework. A specific audience I had in mind was the audience that they're so busy doing, out in the world doing that generous change that they're promoting. And they're speakers, they're doers, they're type A's that put things into action. They're not necessarily writers. So the visual aspect of the framework was very much to kind of support them. Like, you don't have to get into being a super intricate, word smart, personality. You can just be your own, out there doing, experimenting self. And here's some color codings to help you to get that idea into even more spaces, onto even more platforms, whether that's a book or a workbook, a blog, a podcast, a video channel. So that is a big promise as well, that this color coding of the framework will really help those who, it's not their destiny to sit down and write books all day and be hidden from the public eye. They need to be out there leading and, breaking new ground and helping to trailblaze into new solutions, because some of the way society is working is just not working. And we know those leaders are out there. We know they're already doing amazing, groundbreaking things, and we just need to get those voices and amplify them. And the promise of this framework is this is a way. Maybe they'll have the team around them helping go, oh, check it out. I see what you're already doing. The framework says you might try this as well. Add in a few more stories, or you might add in a little bit more of this kind of language to help your audience feel really served and seen and acknowledged and affirmed.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anaik. Okay, I'm going to share something. Here we go. I love this. You sent this to me. You sent me an advanced copy to read, and I read that, loved it. And then, a week or so later, you sent me this, and I'm just like, here it is. This gorgeous, gorgeous colors, and I love it. So do you want? So for people who can't see it, do you want to just, and I'll get it on, I'll send people off to find the copy, because you have a copy. They can get it from you.
Yep, absolutely.
I'll make sure there's a link where people can get a copy of this. So tell me a little bit about what we're looking at.
Beautiful. So we have a color-coded framework. It took many years to figure out how to get it on one page. I can promise you. But it was always going to be 9 colors. And that was a very intentional choice, because I wanted anyone to be able to pick up your average pair of markers, highlighters, crayons, and go, oh no, I'm missing a color. I didn't want that to happen. I wanted them to be able to go, yep, nope, there's purple, there's brown, dark green, light green, orange, yellow, red, blue, and pink. Yes. And they're very intentionally, I studied color psychology a great deal. I'm not going to say these are matching to just one particular version of color psychology, but they definitely draw on the metaphorical uses of color. So we've got your, I did create a little alliteration in the signals. Mm-hmm. And there is, when you want to send an idea into the world, make sure your idea is remarkable, reliable, and relatable. Yeah. Memorable, motivational, and meaningful, proactive, personable, and playful. Brilliant. So your idea doesn't need to be every single one of those things, but my suggestion is that you consider every one of those things and consider whether it serves your audience. So the top level signal, remarkable, is purple. Purple is based on a metaphor that comes from a book called Purple Cow by Seth Godin, where he mentioned traveling through the countryside and seeing lots of brown cows, or, white and black cows, very ordinary. At the beginning of the road trip, they were like, oh my God, so idyllic, so beautiful, look at these cows. 15 minutes into the trip, they were like, boring. So we don't want to put out an idea that's the equivalent of a brown cow. We want to put out an idea that is a purple cow, which is remarkable. It's remarkable means worth remarking upon. And that's where I put that's basically your first hello to the reader. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much a signal I don't think that you can skip, where it's like, why you, why me, why this, why now, all fall under remarkable, where you have to answer. You don't have to methodically answer those questions, but in so many words, you need to answer them. Then we move on to the next signal. It's solid tree trunk brown to represent reliable, which is like the deep research roots of your idea, and the way that, this idea can hold up a lot of weight, just like a large, think of a mighty oak or a large banyan tree. So that in the reliable signal, the tree trunk brown, that's where you put your research, your data, your definitions. But also there's another kind of reliable that you can send, and that is sharing your experience, that really hard-won experience, the 10,000 hours you used to become the expert that you are in the space that you chose. So then moving along, because I'm just hitting the high points, we go to the deep green, which is relatable. I don't think anyone really can get away with skipping this signal, but definitely the amount of relatable you put in will vary depending upon who you are, who your audience is, what your theme is, and what your promise is. But relatable is very much just about kind of endearing the reader by saying, look, I'm just like you. That might involve sharing your origins, your personal origin story, or a little bit of the obstacles that you faced on the way to becoming, who you are today. Then we move on to light green. Is this good? Is this good?
Yes, my favorite. Okay. You know it. It's my favorite.
Light green is the favorite. It's no mistake that this light green is in the middle. Light green represents memorable, which basically is all about story. Relatable, the signal we just had, the deep green, is also story, but it's very personal story. Light green gets more into the universal stories past and stories present, that are going to show us where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. And as we know, Brene Brown says stories are just data with soul. Yes. So the story piece helps the medicine go down. The story piece helps us to sort of we are wired for story. We know this. We have numerous experts who've taught us this in great detail. And so it's no mistake that it's light green, which is also the most healing color in nature. We crave a lot of green. It's been recommended by mental health experts that, you know, if you're feeling a little bit down, go spend some time in the green.
Yeah.
And so it's no mistake that, you know, we want story to be that very overarching element throughout the whole book. Then we move on. Those first four colors, purple, brown, deep green, light green, are very much sort of top level. And then we can go back and weave through our work the following signals. So we've got orange, which is motivational. Motivational stands for affirmation, the kind of words you say to connect with the audience. We all crave recognition and affirmation. And it also stands for encouragement. Because let's face it, life is really hard. So, you know, as a leader, if you're showing up to share your idea, we don't just want to hear how brilliant your idea is. We want to hear, you know, your belief. And it's just this, it's a kind of a magical thing, the way that through a book, you can reach through a book and place encouragement into someone's life. It's their choice whether they receive it or not, right? Depending where they're at. But definitely that positive belief in humanity and that positive belief in the potential and possibilities of your reader is a powerful, powerful thing. And then we get to one of my favorite colors, which is meaningful, which is bright yellow, to represent that light bulb moment that goes off in your brain. And one thing about this framework is that I don't think the light bulbs really go off in your brain until you've lined up the remarkable, reliable, relatable, and the memorable and the motivational signals. But once you have lined all that up, the stories, the research, why you're here, why this, why now, those light bulbs go bam, 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 bam. And then you can share those takeaways. And the irony is sometimes when we're online on social media, we're seeing the takeaways from some really generous ideas. But it's important to notice, and I've noticed this because I've tracked this for years, those generous idea spreaders did not start with those takeaways. The reason their takeaways resonate with us is because they laid down that foundation. They laid down that framework of remarkable and targeting the reader, and they laid down those stories, and they laid down that authority and that hard-won experience. And then we're like, oh, thank you, I'm going to share these takeaways. They're so amazing, these one-liners. So the takeaways look like synthesis, where you're taking a lot of different research and a lot of different ideas, and you're digesting it for your reader, and you're saying, check it out. All this cross-disciplinary, you know, research, there's some new amazing insights we can garner and we can gain so we can move forward in the space. Mm-hmm. And then summaries, which is a very pragmatic thing, which, you know, we're all in a time, we're all time poor now. So summaries are the way that you create those lists and those recaps and those end of chapter recaps. And you create all those handy little bonus pieces of content that are easy to share, easy to print, easy for your reader to work with. So light bulb moments, and then we go on to the red color, which is proactive. Not every book will need proactive. Sometimes it's just an amazing thought leadership piece, or it's an amazing manifesto piece about something that should change in the world. But when it's needed, when it will serve the audience, telling the audience what next with exercises and invitations. Here's something you can write. Here's something you can say. Here's something you can do. And then invitations is very much access more bonuses over here. Access a tribe. I have an opinion about tribes, that there are so many tribes now. Maybe we don't just have one tribe, but maybe we gain a sense of tribe by being in a conversation with people about shared needs or shared pain points or a shared solution that we want to put our energy into. So that invitation to continue the conversation and bring the reader in, like they're not just a bystander, they're not just an observer. They can join the conversation and you know, that's, you know, if you sent the signals, this is the beautiful part. The audience starts to want to respond. Okay, well, how can I how can I be part of this conversation? How can I, put my name on the line or share something or do something or join a social media group to talk with other people about this amazing thing that has me buzzing now. So then we're going into these are, again, all signals you weave into those initial signals that you send. We have the personable signals, which is very much about the language of we. And the personable signals are blue, which represents water, which represents that essential sort of element of life, that we want to be part of something bigger than ourselves and we want to belong. It's definitely one of those social psychologist identified needs where we want to be in conversation, but it's also just a sympathetic way to phrase. We're not just talking about my ideas or their ideas, but we're talking about, some of the we of how we're going to move forward together. So that personable we, the blue, involves affiliation, kind of sympathetic language, and it also involves inclusive language, which we're in an age now, and I know you know this, of we need to be much more aware of who's unwittingly excluded from the conversation. So, and I'm very grateful that I had some amazing consultants on that chapter as well. How can we move forward in a really proactive way? Not I don't realize I'm excluding somebody, so therefore I don't have to worry about it. It's like, no, we're getting into an age where we really need to be accountable and make ourselves accountable. So this chapter deals with that and also gets into instruction. The personable blue signal gets into instruction, and my partner was like, shouldn't instruction be way up front in your signals? And I was like, it's a funny thing. With all the books I've read, I've come up with an audacious proposition of my own, and that is we actually do not want your advice. Nobody, and it's a contradiction. Humanity's contradiction is we're seeking leaders, we're seeking mentorship, we're seeking wisdom, but we don't want someone to get up on a soapbox and just preach at us and tell us, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. So the instruction piece is very much under personable, the me to we, because it's very much going, how can we diplomatically say this in a way that they're not like, we're not lording our status, like we know better, so you have to listen to us. It's like, how do we word it in a way that, here's what worked for me, the author. Here's what worked for others, because we love to hear, real life case studies. And then here's what might work for you. And I go into a little bit of the might, the use of the word might and hedging. And it's funny because after my book went to print, I revisited, we all love strunk and white, elements of style. And the way it's like, get to the point, cut those adverbs, get your writing clean. And I noticed one of the pieces of advice in their book is don't use hedging words. Don't use too much hemming and hawing. And I totally agree with that, except for this piece of, if you really want to be in an equal sort of partnership with your reader and you want to say, look, I've been where you've been. I have done a lot of due diligence and have a lot of research and I've got something interesting to share, but I'm not going to lord my status over you. I'm actually going to make you feel like a partner in this journey. So that's the caveat, that I'm kind of contradicting Strunk and White a little bit for this reason. That I think that if we're too confident, it actually speaks to a little bit of bluffing. That it's more like, and also that assumption that just because my idea is amazing does not mean it will work for everyone, everywhere, all the time. And that's where adding that little bit, it's really just adding a little bit of humility into your signals. This might work for you if this and this and this circumstance line up. And finally, the lucky last signal is bright flamingo pink. It's oh my God, it's completely bonus signal that nevertheless it involves symbols and surprise. Yeah. And my suggestion about this signal is that you can plan it a little bit, but it's even more effective if you let yourself be surprised. Yes. You build your body of work, you build your generous, whatever the container of your idea, whether it's a book or a workbook or a blog, you let that that beautiful flamingo land wherever it wants to land. And it involves using those vibrant metaphors and analogies, which we love so much, which help us. The more abstract, this is what I tell people I work with, the more abstract your idea, the more we need metaphors to help us to ground it in reality. So we can kind of, and there's some amazing linguists and like Steven Pinker and that just go into the power of metaphors, the way we use metaphors without even noticing. So that symbols and obviously visuals actually plays into this signal as well, which as you can see, I've definitely gone all in and tried to harness visuals to help with that piece. And then surprise, the very last bit of the playful pink signal is unexpected words. When someone makes up a new word, linchpin, pro blogger, sketch noter, they make up a new word either to serve a new audience or to encapsulate a new kind of concept, to give us a new way of thinking. Sticky acronyms work with that as well. Unexpected humor gets in there at the very end, and that's usually when I've noticed humor being used, the most effective way for people spreading ideas is it's a little bit self-deprecating humor, where you may have all this research and all this amazing hard-won experience, but the more you raise your status in that way, the more it's a gift to the reader to poke a little bit of fun at yourself, to show your reader you're not taking yourself too seriously. Because let's face it, we need a little bit of levity in our lives, and life is so serious. So we need a little bit of contrast. Yeah. And then finally, the unexpected endings. And the unexpected endings in the surprise is that when we allow ourselves to be surprised, to see where the trail leads us, when we're not going on a sort of a pre-mapped route and we're trying to explore it on the edges of the possible, which is the kind of leader I'm trying to serve, we also need to expect the unexpected and allow ourselves to be surprised by that, and even show the reader that we're surprised by that. Like, ooh, this is taking us somewhere new. And I think that there's a lot of scope for that in a world that needs a lot of fresh new ways of seeing, a lot of fresh new frameworks and fresh solutions to proactively, move into the future in a way that our children and grandchildren will have a beautiful, sustainable, healthy planet to grow up on and live and work on. We need those unexpected endings to help us to blaze that trail. And that's the 9 colors.
That's beautiful, Anaik. It's beautiful. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that for a minute and just going to say that somebody's like, yay. Somebody on Facebook is giving you applause.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I told some of my friends and family, so mwah, mwah.
She's it's a friend or a family member. It could be someone completely.
It might be something. It might be someone. Absolutely, Melody. Absolutely. Well, I'm sending a virtual hug anyway. Thank you so much.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Anaik. That was such a really detailed. I didn't expect you to take so much time and to give us so much detail. I'm so amazed. You know what? Do you know what word comes to mind? The word. What word do you love? Generous. That was very generous of you.
Oh,
yeah. Thank you. Do you have an excerpt you could read to us as we wrap up?
I do. This is. In my book, I talk about one way to establish your authority is to share the 10,000 influences that brought you on your journey, and you're very much showing up to be a guide to your reader. This is the framing. The reader is the hero. And so showing us that as a guide, you have guides as well. So I'm giving away the spoiler. I should just read it. So here we go. Have we got 5 minutes for this, or should I cut it a bit shorter? Okay. All right. I'm just going to position it on top of the screen so I'm not looking away. Imagine that one day you get a letter in your mailbox. It's handwritten with a mysterious invitation to a dinner party with a host you like, along with a dozen names you recognize as some of your favorite inventors and artists philosophers, and philanthropists. There's just one problem. Yesterday, you received a letter similar to this one, and the day before that. All the invitations are compelling, the locales and other guests interesting, but your time is finite. Which one do you say yes to, and which one do you decline? Fortunately, unlike the real-life dinner invitation in this scenario, when it comes to hanging out with our favorite influences, both living and dead, we have access to many more than we could ever meet in person. And in the information age, we have nearly limitless choices about whose voices we pay attention to. So 10,000 influences is a useful reminder that the list of the characteristics we look for in our most valued guides, mentors, and advisors includes a willingness to learn from their most valued guides, mentors, and advisors. You have an opportunity when selling your idea to tell us who has influenced your work, your worldview, and your thinking. In the concept of creating a guide-hero relationship with the audience, the 10,000 influences is one more experience-related signal you can send that tells us where you get your information and who you admire. Often when citing reliable research, we already name our trusted sources of information, and that might be enough. But it's worth noting that the names of those who have influenced our ideas tell a story in themselves. Who they were, when and where they lived, what their contribution to the great ongoing conversation was or is. Your influences are all worth sharing, concurs writer and artist Austin Kleon, because they clue people in to who you are and what you do, sometimes even more than your own work. Beyond lending credibility, sharing your influences also tells us what neighborhood your idea is drawing from and also serving. Going back to the hypothetical scenario that opened this section, what if you were the one to plan that dinner party and send exclusive invites to a select audience? What notable guests might also be there? What characteristics do they share? What makes them worth blocking off an evening to spend time with? And what might that say about the kinds of conversations you're making space for? In terms of what kind of influences to invite to the table, Brene Brown, who has written extensively on shame, vulnerability, and wholehearted living, makes it sound easy, drawing inspiration, she says, from the brave innovators and disruptors whose courage feels contagious. Amanda Gorman, the youngest inaugural poet in U.S. history, says she finds the strength to speak up by calling on her honorary ancestors. Quote, "These are people who might not be related to you by blood or by birth, but who are more than worth saying their names because you stand on their shoulders all the same." Austin Kleon refers to his influences as a creative lineage, stretching back in time, a kind of chosen family tree. Steal Like an Artist is his exploration of how we can emulate our many influences. Who to copy is easy, he declared. You copy your heroes, the people you love, the people you're inspired by, the people you want to be. Then he added an important caveat. Don't just steal the style, steal the thinking behind the style. You don't want to look like your heroes. You want to see like your heroes. Whoever we choose, however we emulate, the point is that we too can feature people who have shaped the world with their courage and creativity.
Beautiful. Thank you. So you can learn more about Anaik at amplifyingideas.com, and she has resources at amplifyingideas.com/resources. Where else might people find you, Anaik?
Just a plug that the resources page actually has a workbook, which is an executive summary of my entire book and includes all those juicy color-coded details. So I highly encourage people. I would love you to sign up. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. If you love book reviews, that's where I post book reviews. And if you Google Anaik at Amplifying Ideas, you will find me. There is no doubt. And I look forward to hearing from you if you have.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Anaik, for coming today and for being so generous with your information. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Melody. You're amazing.
Yeah, and to all the authors out there, right? Send signals to the world, right? So people know you're there to serve them, to help, to change them in ways that, of course, they want to change. But yes, you're there to, send signals. This is really, really important. So next week, I'm talking to Paula Kent, and who will be digging into important lessons from Joseph Campbell and talking about her new book, Heroic Choices. So I will see everyone next week.
Beautiful.